All right, good morning. Hey, this is Anthony Parent of IRSMedic. Sorry, got a few minutes get going. We had some difficulties getting the Doug Edelman indictment. Many of you, if you try to log on to Pacer, it's really the government in action. So I had to log in on two different accounts today, and neither one would work. And anyway, luckily John had it, so we have it today. We're going to be talking about it. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Doug Edelman indictment, but we didn't have the indictment in front of us. Now we actually have it. So this is surely going to be pretty interesting. I haven't had a chance to review it yet. So I'm going to be reviewing it with you guys for the first time. John has. And so let me just introduce our fantastic guest. By the way, I'm Anthony Parent, your host of IRSMedic. I am a tax attorney, been doing this for 20 years, and my friends Keith and John join me nearly every week as we discuss some issues about this whole taxation. We kind of got together because of our disgust at how the U.S. taxes Americans worldwide. But that kind of disgust has morphed into the other areas as well, including some of the strange things and the ways the government punishes people overseas or those who have anything with the word foreign. And so the Doug Edelman indictment is really up our alley because it's one of those things that happens that sort of has a chilling effect on Americans overseas and people who are married to non-U.S. persons. So it does seem like it's by design and timed to intimidate people who the government doesn't like. So with me today is Keith Redmond, the advocate for the fantastic advocate for Americans abroad. Good morning, Keith. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning.
Do we have the birds in Maryland this morning? Are they with us?
Yeah, birds in Maryland.
All right.
The family home.
All right. Keith's joining us. Keith is actually in the Beltway, so he always has his ear to the ground of what's actually happening in D.C. Along joining Keith and I is the great John Richardson. John Richardson, he is the wartime consigliere, as we still refer him to. John really throws his intellectual weight around, I would say, and he really throws things and will give an analysis that's difficult to find somewhere else, and always a fantastic great way to start off any conversation about a topic is looking into what John Richardson has to say about it. So I'm going to get up his article that he wrote on this topic here, and I'll put the link to this in the super chat right now. So if you guys do want to check it out, let me go back to the super chat here and put it in here. Look at this multitasking, incredible. All right, so there's the link to John's article on this, and I'm just going to share it right now. And okay, hopefully this is going to happen here, right? I mean, we have window. All right, technology, work with us today. That's what's going to happen, right? All right, here we go. Let's see if we got it. All right, there we go. John's article's right here. Let me make this a little bigger for everyone if I can. And so here it is. And John's article. John, so your article is, well, what does it mean for Americans abroad, right? And that's the thing that kind of brought us together. But I think the other question too people would have is, hey, what does it kind of mean for everybody too, right? I mean, it's what does it mean for your opportunities? What does it mean for your opportunities as an American as well? So John, good morning to you. So how are you doing? What do you think of this?
Okay, bad cold. We'll see how long I can last.
All right. Oh, thanks for. All right. Let's see what we got. Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay. Well, this is of course our second discussion on this, and that post is actually a couple of weeks old. I don't know. Just sort of reflected some of my thoughts and some links at the time. This all started, of course, with the it started last July, interestingly.
Right.
And and there was an article in Forbes written by Virginia Latour-Jeker, who really framed the issue in terms of the difference between beneficial and legal ownership. Who actually owns stuff. It's funny, I do remember reading it at the time, but I didn't really the total significance and where it would go really didn't register with me at the time for some reason. And then, of course, we have the journalist Margot Patrick, who wrote this article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. And as you can see, it's, pretty emotive language, I would say, at the least, designed probably by design, not accident.
Yeah.
To frame this guy as, sort of a low life, etc. But what's interesting about it is, look at her tweet there. Just pull up and let's look at it. And let's look at how it's designed. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the flames, and I think obscure, but I think the real issue is here. And by the way, it was very well written. I mean, no disrespect to Miss Patrick. I thought it was a good article. That said, let's look at the way she's coming at this.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
So a military contract bonanza. So we start off with that. God damn it. It's
what do you mean?
Donald Trump. These people are making money off contracts with the United States.
Well, but isn't our military a great thing too? It's like the military is a great thing for America, but it's also a bad thing because you're making money off the military.
Well,
what?
So we start with that, right? And then I go look at this European mansion. Okay. Disgruntled business partners. It's a jet-setting case of one of America's biggest alleged tax cheats. And then look at the picture of him there. I assume that's him. Just pull it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, wow.
I would not call that. I mean, he looks suspicious in the picture, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? So,
well, yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, these guys work for him to help him cheat on his taxes. It's basically, these stark, scary guys work with him to cheat on taxes. But I mean, I mean, if someone is making, I guess, I mean, just, and like the first thing's like, well, this seems kind of weird. Someone reported this income. He reported all this income. Okay, not exactly $1 million every year, but pretty close. Well, I would say someone who's making this amount of money could afford a mansion. I'm like, no, I think they could afford a mansion in Europe and maybe even more than one. So I don't, like, it seems a little bit, wow, we're just kind of throwing things around here. And this is what I would say. I don't think you need to go and say that, this is somebody who's working for the government, because this is the problem with media. In order to get access to the people to interview you that are going to advance your career, hey, you're going to have to do some favors for her. And I don't even know if she wrote this tweet. I mean, this is because, who even knows?
She must have approved it. It is her.
Something, right? Yeah. But I mean, really, this is how you're tried in the court of public opinion. This is how it starts.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, an important aspect of it. So the article appeared in the Wall Street Journal, and I'm pretty sure that the link on that links right through. So I don't even think that's behind the paywall.
That's not a paywall?
But one can get the thing behind the paywall. No, I mean, I would encourage people to not only read it, but maybe look at the comments. But we won't go to the comments.
Yeah.
Today. Okay. So let's backtrack.
Ooh, another day in paradise. Oh, look at that. Caught up with them. Oh, look at that. Oh my God. Come on. This is pathetic.
Well,
anyway, all right. Let's continue. I don't want to.
The thing is, Anthony, that in a broader sense, what this is, I mean, it's very, very important to realize that this is a man who moved apparently permanently. I don't think he'd be back in the United States had he not been extradited.
Right.
I mean, apparently moved from the United States sometime in the 90s. Now, the reason people become lawyers is because they can't do math. But even with my math, this is 2025, that's like 35 years ago, right? He left the United States. And what is significant here, I think, is that it is a very, very clear example of the United States taxing U.S. citizens abroad, right? I mean, for anybody who thinks this is a myth, not only is the claim of the IRS that the money that an American citizen earns outside the United States is owned by the United States, okay, but it's also, very clear that, hey, we'll come after you. Now, it's not really clear to me why, why such a ferocious reaction to this guy, right? Because we've got, all kinds of evidence that, he's brought in as a result of one of these investigations. What's this J5 thing? Criminal tax investigators from the United States, Canada, Australia, the UK, I think, all coming together, to go after this guy. Now, there must be, why are they doing that? I don't know. I mean, I don't condone tax evasion, obviously, but, it seems to me that there are worse tax evaders in the world. But I don't know. But it is interesting that they're going after. Now, maybe the answer is that that the company that he was operating, and we'll get to that in a minute, not only had, sold the U.S. military a lot of jet fuel, billions of dollars apparently.
Wasn't he a patriot then, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting question.
Top patriot. Arming our military is the best thing you can do.
Well, in 2010, there's a congressional inquiry into his company. And one of the interesting facts, and I suspect it may be of significance, is that his lawyers would not reveal the owner of the company, right, during the hearing. So, that may very well. And for those who are interested in my post, I'll put a link to that report.
It's is it in this article?
No.
Okay.
Well, there's a reference to it, but I provided the actual link to the report. But let's not go there.
Okay. All right, that might be something to do later. Oh, wait, okay, but that does sound, we might be finding our reason why.
Yeah, but what it does do is it provides a reason perhaps for the interest in him. So what's happening is this, all right, that we've got this guy who, I guess he must have been in his 30s or maybe 40, I don't know, and he leaves the United States permanently. He apparently, no suggestion he had any particular money when he left the United States, which is also interesting. In other words, the money he made had nothing to do with the United States, period, right?
Right. Nothing did.
Yeah.
Right.
And so he remarries, and then he does another extremely suspicious thing. Okay, extremely suspicious. He marries a woman who's a French citizen.
There you go.
Not American.
There you go.
Now that is an affront to the United States of America. I mean, we see that reflected in the tax code all the time, the problem of the foreign spouse.
Now I want to turn over to Keith for his reaction to this, because that's where I think Keith is. Keith, you run the group on how many of your members on your American Expatriates group have foreign spouses? I don't think we take a survey, but what would you estimate?
Well, I would say I don't know on the group itself, but over the years that dealing with Americans overseas, as you know, I do for consultation calls, the vast majority of them have a non-American spouse.
Wait, the majority?
The vast majority of the people I've dealt with over the past few years on consultation calls have a non-American spouse.
Oh my! And we have done videos. I think a couple of them on the problems.
Well, Keith, do you understand? Do you understand why the foreign spouse? The primary reason the foreign spouse is prima facie evidence of evil intent. Do you understand that? Why that is, Keith?
Yeah, I actually do. Yeah, it's a very difficult situation. And the non-American spouse, 9 times out of 10, just cannot believe what the American spouse has to go through vis-a-vis the U.S. tax system. They had no clue when they got married to the American spouse. No clue whatsoever.
Do you think there ought to be a special marriage prep course specifically aimed for people who are considering marrying an American?
I think there should be, and I think it would be a very good training course.
What do you think, Anthony?
If you were a smart
John.
American
Well,
spouse.
I'll
let Keith finish. No, Keith, you finish. I don't.
Yeah, I was just going to say, also in concert with having a training course, I think it also would be important for that non-American spouse to say, if you're going to marry me, I love you, but I don't love your citizenship. You're going to have to renounce.
And that's fair, Keith and John, because that is basically what I would say. Because now I realize, because Keith sends me a lot of people that he talks to. It's like, Anthony, this person doesn't need to comply. Can you help him out? And I'm like, okay, so this very computer right here, many Zoom calls with husband and wife. And yes, Keith, now that I think about it, it is rare for me to have 2 Americans on the call. So typically, I am playing a little bit of marriage therapist, a little bit. I do dabble in a little training of that, and I try to explain, and I understand the position, because that how incredulous that non-US spouse is going to be like, come on, this can't be real. You're joking, right? And they're like, come on, this is an April Fool joke that you're going to eventually reveal because this is totally absurd. But no, that is the truth, and that's where it is. But I would say, but John, you know what? We always talk about John, and John helps a lot of people renounce their citizenship. But I would strongly consider it if you are going to marry a non-US person overseas. If you value, no question, if you value your marriage more than your stupid country, then you better renounce. I would just say that because it will absolutely drive your marriage nuts. And I think it's really and what John alluded to, I really do think it's by design. I really do think it's all by design what the government does.
Well, Anthony, another way of looking at this, okay, is as follows. We look at everything that's going on in the United States or from the United States and all these things that are associated with the United States. And all of this can really be summarized with one basic principle, even though it looks a little different. And it's this: you do not interact with the land of the free for free.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's what it really is. So from another point of view, right, I think that one should view the issues raised by a non-citizen marrying a U.S. citizen as essentially another tariff, right? It's a tariff that's imposed on them, because of all these problems. Now, if we look at, and the reason for this, by the way, what I was hoping to tease out of Keith there, right, is that the problem is that, the U.S., at least theoretically, does not have taxing jurisdiction over a non-citizen who doesn't live in the United States.
Yeah.
Therefore, okay, the opportunity for a U.S. citizen to allow or create a situation where assets are owned by the the foreign spouse is a presumptive form of tax evasion, right? I mean, this is what we have. So, from another point of view, I think it would be not unreasonable to see the treatment, what happens when a non-citizen marries a U.S. citizen. These forms of tariffs are imposed that force them to deal with this horrible regulatory regime, and the recognition that a marriage, what I call the FBAR marriage, the marriage between the U.S. citizen and the non-citizen, creates the opportunity for the U.S. citizen to treat the foreign spouse as really a foreign trust, right? And we know how punitive the foreign trust rules are, right? As a way to, hide assets. Obviously, Anthony, the only reason an American citizen would marry a non-citizen is for reasons of hiding assets.
Hiding assets. Right. You get your mansions. You want to get your mansions overseas. And I got to just say, I want to go. So and here's Keith's group. I'll link to Keith's group if you're on Facebook's. And I'm just sort of thinking, I'm like, Keith, if you change the name of your group to coping with coping to a marriage to an American, do you think you'd lose anybody, or maybe you'd even, do you think? I mean, that's essentially what the group is. It's marriage.
I wouldn't lose anybody. No.
Yeah.
No, they don't see it that way. They don't see it that way because they don't understand it well enough to see it that way.
But hopefully this is where we're peeling it off, because this is where immediately where my mind goes, okay? Because the government kind of set it up in a very, very nice way to kind of, close the trap. And it's like, wow, this seems all by design, in fact, because we have the Roger Ver indictment, which we've covered extensively. And essentially, Roger Ver committed no crime. He renounced exactly the right way. He did it the way that the law required. His tax firm did a good job. They followed the law and they didn't squeal. They did a really good job. I really like his law firm. They did it the right way. But Roger Ver is a threat. And really what the government needed to do is like, oh, you think you're going to renounce? Here's a question mark. What are you going to value your assets at? Huh? You're going to go high or low? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? If you don't do it right, we may 10 years later indict you for tax evasion, even though it's an exit tax, so not really tax, and we kind of invented it at a whole layer to interfere with your right of citizenship. So that's kind of what we have going on with Roger Ver. And so now the thing is like, now that fear. It's like you have the fear of the chasing of the IRS demon. You're like, all right, let me get away from this. I'm going to renounce. Hold on a second there. We're going to get you this way too. And so this is really the tyranny, the tyranny that the whole government has. And so the question comes down is like, okay, what's going to be the worst? What's going to be the best way of worst things? And a lot of people think, okay, well, I'll take no action because that way I'm not deciding. Well, you are deciding, as Rush would say. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And so I think that's a lot of the dynamic that we're getting with this. And to get to your point, John, they're not seeing it. They're not seeing but there's real risk out there that's chasing them away. Like, okay, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Maybe we should just divorce. Yeah, you know what? That's really gets to the solution.
Well,
maybe we should just divorce.
That can create, additional problems.
Oh, there you go. Right. Divorce usually does. Your divorce and tax problems go hand in hand. Yeah.
Let's see how this applies to the Edelman case. Okay.
Because all right. Yeah. Let's get this up here. Yeah. We've been promising people to get to the indictment. So let's.
Okay. And it's right on point. But before we get to the indictment, so let's start with the principle that, the problem with the FBAR marriage, right, meaning the marriage between the citizen and the non-citizen, is that it provides the opportunity for the U.S. citizen to arrange for the non-citizen to hold assets. Now, very common examples of this would be, and I see this all the time, is in the family home, right? So in many countries, example Canada, where I'm sitting right now, but many other countries, the capital gain on the sale of a principal residence is not taxable. Not so for U.S. citizens. So, now understand, okay, that the capital gains exemption is really an important part of Canada's tax code, and it's a very important organizing principle for retirement planning. It's far more than that, right? It's, how Canada has decided to organize, the important part of the important aspect of financial planning, right? So we have an American citizen and they sell their house in Toronto, and then all of a sudden, because the American owns the house, we have a situation where the U.S. wants to impose a tax on that. Canada does not. And what it really is capital stripping out of Canada via the U.S. tax code. That's what it is. And that is why I'm going to write a post on this, why I think the time has come for Canada to exempt American citizens from the capital gains exemption on principal residences, exempt them, because if it's taxable in Canada, then you can use a tax credit against the U.S. thing. And what it will do, it will at least keep the capital in Canada where it's intended to be.
Oh my gosh, so that is fascinating.
We'll make that a separate discussion.
Yeah, that is ironic. Thank you for that,
But
John.
let's look at, and people say, well, that's discriminatory. Well, Jesus Christ, I mean, the whole world has discriminated against U.S. citizens under the FATCA rules. They've already made the decision that U.S. citizens do not have the same rights under tax laws that other citizens do. So why not extend it to bar the United States effectively from using U.S. citizens to strip capital out of other countries, right? I think that this is something that should be done. Okay.
So I would just reset your point is like, hey, look, the government isn't necessarily trying intentionally to destroy marriages overseas. Rather, that's just a byproduct of the government's capital stripping process of grabbing things from around the world.
Well, it's a byproduct of, the U.S. I mean, again, as I've said a million times, all you need to do to understand a country is look at its tax code, right? And, we have a tax code in the United States that is a heavy, heavy bias of hatred and suspicion of everything that's foreign or anything that's foreign, right? So, and it's aggravated by the fact of citizenship as a basis for tax residency. But I mean, that's part of the problem. But look, let's get back to Mr. Edelman here. Now, the reason why what we've been talking about is directly relevant to Edelman and is important to understand what was going on is that the crux of the government's indictment, and we'll go over the facts, but the crux of the indictment is you were using your French citizen wife to disguise the ownership of assets. You really own these assets, not your wife.
That's what it's about.
Right? I mean, that's really what's going on here, right?
And they'll do, yeah. And I can't wait to get And so they'll do anything. They'll do anything.
Everything stems from this, right? Because
Yeah.
the whole basis of this Edelman thing, there can be a tax under reporting, tax evasion, tax avoidance, however you want to frame it, if and only if, okay, the government can prevail on the claim that Mr. Edelman did not own these companies, that his wife owned them. Okay, now that's why this is really, really important. Now, you know, I read the indictment again a couple days ago, and I'm not, you know, really, I don't think any of us are prepared to go through it, you know, line by line. But that is the basic point here, okay, that Mr. Edelman created these companies or whatever, okay, you know, that we're talking about, Red Star, Mina, whatever they were, you know, in the early 2000s. But the government's claim is that no, Mr. Edelman owned the companies, right? Because if he owns the companies, you know, then the U.S. has the right to tax the companies, you know, et cetera, because of his citizenship. If he doesn't, if everything is owned by his wife, it's a completely different story, right? Okay, I mean, the most simple way to understand it is the part of the indictment, part of it, to justify this was that in 2020, the shares of the company, and we'll go through this in a second, were sold for $40 million or 20 or something anyway. The shares were sold, and Mr. Edelman did not, now as an American citizen, he would have been taxed on the capital gain. He didn't report the income on the basis that they were his wife's shares, his wife sold, you know, sort of thing. So, I mean, you know, that sort of shows you where we are. So,
all right.
So the crux of this, and this is what's important to understand, is that in my opinion on this, okay, and I would not read too much into my opinion because this is based on the indictment, and the indictment is not necessarily true. It's just a bunch of statements that they've created, you know, to put this thing together, and they have to prove this stuff, obviously, in the context of a trial. Now, will they or won't they? I don't know. I think that part of what we should be talking about is the language in the indictment that refers to 4 people. Now, the way the people are referred to is as co-conspirators, interestingly, not 4 people.
John, I do want to get to the indictment. I'm going to pop up the indictment right now, and we'll get to that part because I got the headline, and I'm like chomping at the bit here. I got to say, I'm sorry, John. I'm chomping at the bit because it's something that we've discussed so much. You and I have gone through this, and you were the one who kind of pointed me out. To this issue because we've talked about how the FBAR is totally illegal because there is actually no statutory authorization for it. There is no if you look at the statute, 31 USC 5314, I've done it a million times on this channel. In no way, shape, or form does it attempt to regulate foreign bank accounts. It actually regulates monetary instruments being imported and exported out of the U.S. with foreign agents. That's what it actually does. So let's see what the indictment says because Doug Edelman was charged with FBAR violations. Let's see what
among other things. Okay, they don't.
Among other things, but that is the part that stood up. John, I'm reading this as live with everybody else. So this is what I'm freaking out on. This is what is like, I am chomping at the bit. Take a look at his violations. He is guilty of violating the regulations. Look, they put down the statute 5314, and he is criminally liable for violating the FBAR regulations, which invent the FBAR. The FBAR regulations say 5314 requires an FBAR form, which isn't true, which is not true. The regulations, whatever, distort the truth, lie. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly not true. And here's the proof right here, folks. Right here. Here's your proof, because if 5314 actually authorized the FBAR, they wouldn't need to put these regulations in there to say that's actually what he violated. So right there, counts 19 to 30. There's the government trying to pull a sleight of hand on everybody, right? There it is, and there's the proof. They wouldn't need that because look at all these other. Where's the regulations he violated in counts 1 through 18? Not there. They could just go to the statutes. But look at that. You need to be criminally charged via regulation for the FBAR because, again, there is no FBAR authorization, and Treasury is wildly out of control. They know about this. They are wildly out of control, acting illegally. The Treasury is willful. The Treasury is not willfully blind, but they are acting willful in creating a law where no law exists. And the problem with this, folks, is that the way they penalize is brutal. The way they penalize is completely brutal. You don't even need to owe taxes to be assessed an FBAR penalty. If you're just the wrong kind of person, that's the kind of person who gets FBAR penalties. That's what it gets down to. So they're sorry. That's what I was trying to get out. So I think that's the first thing. John, your comments on that. So what do you think? I think we got a point, right?
Well, I think that the FBAR is a very, very small component of this whole thing.
Okay.
I mean, I think they've thrown that in. I mean, we've talked about FBAR ad nauseum, and there's all kinds of issues, obviously, with that. I note parenthetically, obviously they're arguing a willful violation, but they don't need that, okay? To cause
right, and I think we could wrap up the FBAR thing. Yeah. But hey, look, that's the first thing that pops out before I even scroll down, and I think that just bears witness. So we can move on to the rest of the indictment.
Well, it's a way to add weight to everything else.
Right. All right.
But let's just look at what the way they here. Pull back up a minute.
Okay.
I think it's useful to look at, what they've done is they have, thanking them for this. Okay, they've described what these sections are, right, that he's charged with. Now, Title 18 is criminal code stuff, as you know. And so he's being charged with conspiracy to defraud the United States. Okay, conspiracy. Conspiracy, I think, memory serves, requires an agreement with people. Maybe that's
another
why
person, right? Yep.
The other four people are called co-conspirators. Making false statements, okay, and then, tax evasion, et cetera. So that's where this is. Now, what happened, by the way, we talked about this last time, would be that this whole thing essentially started, right, is when he entered the offshore voluntary disclosure program in 2015. And this is apparently, at least it seems to me, that a lot of his problems are rooted in that, okay?
Right. Trying to comply with the U.S. government is oftentimes the start of your trouble.
Well, this is where, again, I'm just reading, trying to make inferences from the indictment. So I may be wrong, but it seems to me that what happened is that the filings and the voluntary disclosure did not disclose ownership of the companies. Okay. However, it seems to me he would, well, hang on a minute. No. Okay. Let's kind of, okay. The point is, okay, that based on what he represented in the filings, okay, that seems to be the trigger, all right, for his not disclosing his income, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so now I think what we need to do, if you want, is to go back and sort of go through the chronology on a very high level of some of the facts here, right? And we can do this in like 1 minute. So what happens is this, that there are these two companies, I forget what they're called, Red Star and Mina or something like this. Anyway, these companies were created by Mr. Edelman and a business partner who's a non-U.S. citizen. Now, I know that means they're not controlled foreign corporations. So the 50% interest, we'll call it the Edelman interest. All right, meaning that, imagine the companies had two shareholders, one who was not a U.S. citizen, the other who was. So it's Mina Red Star, okay? This is the Edelman interest. Now, here's the bottom line. If the shares in the company are owned by Mr. Edelman, then they're owned by a U.S. person, okay, et cetera, and with all the attendant consequences. If they're owned by his wife, Miss Le Dain, then because she's a French citizen, the U.S. doesn't have, loses those taxing rights effectively. So what this is really about is reaching, or well, not completely, but it has an aspect to it of reaching in the marriage and trying to decide, who owns the assets. Now, one thing that's interesting, you would think, right? I mean, if you wanted to, like, I don't know. It's hard for me to understand exactly what their claim is. I mean, I think what their claim is that we don't give a goddamn who legally owned those assets. They're yours, and we don't care if you didn't own them. We're going to deem you to own them, and you should have reported this stuff.
It's like a lifestyle audit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
we don't like your lifestyle.
Yeah. And if that's what they're doing, the people in places like Keith's group ought to be concerned, although I know they won't be, right? But this is interesting because this would be, an example of the U.S. government coming in essentially to the mayors and saying, we don't really care where the legal ownership of these assets lies. Our view is that these were owned by a U.S. citizen. Now, just imagine that principle being extended to an FBAR marriage where a U.S. citizen comes up with most of the money to buy the family home, and it gets put in the foreign spouse's name, even if a gift tax return has been filed, right? Even if, et cetera. It seems to me, that, this introduces that as a problem. And it's obscured because everybody hates the rich. Everybody hates Edelman. All this.
Yeah.
They really build this up.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway, that's the issue here. And when you read the indictment, my feeling on this is that if they had really, really overwhelming evidence, that he owned this stuff, I think it would be a little clearer.
Well, that's kind of the tell here when I'm looking at this, and it's just little things and I'm just going to show you one little thing that just sort of I'm fixated on. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem right. But when I read this first thing between 2003, 2020, Douglas Edelman was a 50% owner of Mina Corp and Red Star Enterprises, collective Mina Red Star, a defense contracting business that received more than $7 billion in contracts with the U.S. Department of Defense to provide jet fuel. We don't have a more precise number, and I'm vague about, what's this Red Star Enterprises? It's not written away, is that a DBA or is that a separate entity? And it's very vague, and usually you have more precision when you have a stronger case. And that's the lack of precision and vagueness. I'm not even sure what this is. He was a 50% owner of what? Of the stock? We're not exactly saying what it is. It's not being accurate.
They make it clear later that it is shares, right?
Okay, but number 2 doesn't, and I'm just pointing this out. This part is just it's not really worded with precision, and that's or very over $7 billion. Well, what's the relevance to that? And if it's relevant, why don't you have the real number? Why are you just estimating? And what does that mean? What does it mean that
the relevance is it's purely emotive. It's
right. That's the point. And I think that's the point. This is an emotive. It's an emotive indictment, which is interesting. The government. Anyway, I'll never mind. But it's an emotive indictment, and I think that's the way to do it. It's not very okay. All right. Well, I hate the guy already. He's a defense contractor who got $7 billion. He's guilty. Okay.
Well, there's to be sure, there's an awful lot of that in it, and what is interesting though is that then the question becomes, so you're a prosecutor, the question becomes, most of litigation, criminal trials they're not a search for truth, they're always a search for proof, right? So the question becomes, how do they prove this? And now the indictment just has to allege facts that would, justify these charges. It doesn't have to go into this in huge detail.
All right, but I'm just saying again, and I'm looking at number 3, something that's a little weird there too. It's okay, Mina Red Star became profitable in 2005. Doug Edelman directed his profits from Mina Red Star to bank accounts. Well, what do you mean? Did he embezzle? Or did he take a distribution? And what do you mean profits? How did those get to him? Did he take it as dividends or did he do something else? Did he cheat a partner? What? And that's where it's there's not a lot of precision here. Directed
there isn't. But what it does do, he took his profits. It's a statement that they're his profits and not his wife's, right? And that is, the real significance of that, right? So what this does is it goes through page after page, describing this in a way that he had complete control over the companies, that it was all really his money, et cetera, et cetera. That's
okay. So they're trying to pay. It's his profits, but again, the lack of precision is concerning. The lack of They're like, well, they weren't his wife, they were his. Really? That's what you're going to...
That's the point. Not where did they go, but that he was the person, who was able to do
Yeah, but they really didn't, it's, again, more emotive language. And they're also, trying to get you to buy their whole narrative this entire time.
Well, yeah.
They're trying to get you to buy into this. Oh, yeah, but it's just, and Doug Edelman closed bank accounts. Wow, what do you mean? And moved funds to avoid disclosure to U.S. authorities. Well, how?
Well, again, Anthony, the point of it is not the how, but that it's his. That's the point they're trying.
Right. They're trying to establish, but they're not. All right. So we'll just, I think that's what we're going to see. I don't want to beat it too much. Doug Edelman lost your money by a ski chalet in Austria. The house is springing too, and multiple yachts. There you go. Let's look at
it this way. I mean, one could describe this as, the Edelman family bought a number of yachts. Okay. The Edelman family bought a number of yachts. Mr. and Mrs. Edelman bought a number of yachts, but that's not how it's described at all.
Right. Yeah.
How does he did this?
He did it.
And the purpose of this is to, pin the ownership of the assets on him, right? Now, presumably, again, this doesn't have to get into a lot of evidence, but presumably they've done searches for legal documents, and plenty of them, that would, pin him with the ownership of the stuff. I really don't know. But what is interesting is that it's pretty clear that they're using, and I think at least one of the four co-conspirators has entered into some kind of a plea deal with the U.S. government to testify against Mr. Edelman.
Yeah, and I think he's got his own problems going on there too. I think he's got his own indictments and his own things, so he's not necessarily somebody who, he has an incentive to say what the government wants him to say.
Well, that's right.
Right?
That's right. But
he certainly does, right?
But the reason that's significant, right, is that, then we have a third party who is saying, look, I was there and I know that he controlled all this and this was really his, and this business about, Mrs. Le Dain is an attempt to, create some kind of a legal fiction. Although it is interesting that in 2012, again, if I'm understanding this correctly, this is just what I'm getting from the indictment. That Mr. Edelman went to some, London, UK, I guess they were living there apparently, based law firm that specialized in, this type of stuff, right? Creation of trusts and blah, 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 the types of things to separate legal ownership from beneficial ownership. And, tried to set up something that would, distance him from the assets, right? Now, the thing about this is that often to distance yourself from the assets, you need to kind of get rid of the assets. So, maybe he did that. I really don't know. But what's important to understand here is that what this is about, if Anthony, you want to give an opening statement, you're the lawyer. Okay. What you say is this case is about one thing and one thing only. And that is, number one, who owned the shares of these two companies? Was it Mr. Edelman or was it his wife? And two, is the government able to prove that his wife did not own the shares? Okay, on the basis of, the proper evidentiary standard. What it is not about, is the fact that this is some rich bastard, who has a yacht. That's not what it's about.
Yeah, and I hear, and we were talking about how his problems began when he tried to come in compliance with the U.S. government. That's really where it is. So again, this very, very imprecise, very emotive indictment continues after telling the false story of Mina Red Star's creation of U.S. Congress. Okay, we have no idea when that was done, what was said. Okay, whatever false story or what was actually false, we don't know.
Well, we do know that. There was a hearing into this, the Red Star Company, the relationship between the Red Star Company and the U.S. military. There was a congressional hearing, and I've linked to it, in fact, the whole report in my post. And what apparently happened was that the lawyer for Red Star was asked flat out who the owners were. And he said, well, we're not going to answer the question who the owners were, et cetera, which I'd have to think, fueled this to some degree. Okay. But, what we have here is we have an example of the U.S. claiming the right to tax a U.S. citizen on non-U.S. source income when they don't live in the United States. I mean, that's the more important story here.
I'm just, so he did own it again. And I'm just sort of, so back to the point of what I was trying to make before I get into that. So thank you, John, for keeping me on the rails there. So let me just go back, and this is really the issue that, so, they're trying to frame this as he created a false story. So he submitted a statement under law, under the penalty of law, to enter into the offshore voluntary disclosure program for tax years 2007 to 2014. Telling the false story that his wife was Mina Red Star's owner and founder, right? And then they're claiming, well, he continued with the false returns, claiming the same thing all this time. So, what the government, and because to get to your point, what the government has the burden of proof. The government has the burden of proof to show that Delphine Le Dain was the actual owner of, or wasn't the actual owner. Yeah. And so how do we get, so I guess this is where you just sort of pry apart a marriage. Right? You're going to have to pry apart a marriage to say, what was really going on? What was going on? We want access to your text messages because we need to look inside your marriage and pierce your marriage to see who was the really owner, because we're, the United States of America is the only country in the world with worldwide taxation on its citizens. And so it's sort of, just terrifying that, the same thing is that he entered into the OVDP, and that's really the thing that allowed them to kind of dig in a little bit more, because I guess someone in Congress was offended. That's what it looks like. I know Keith has got to drop out, so I want to get his last commentary before he has to drop out. What he thinks so far about everything that's going on, Keith?
I don't know. The bottom line is, and as John has said, people, if they're able to, they're just going to have to renounce. That's just the bottom line with all this. Otherwise, you're twisting yourself into a pretzel year after year after year. That's what my take is, to sum it up for me. Yeah. People just got to get out if they're able to.
If you're able to really get out, and it's always better, and I would say this is Keith, this is the problem that we have, is that we'll talk to you. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, with this Edelman guy, if he had renounced, and I know it's always, Monday morning quarterbacking, but if he had renounced, he wouldn't be going through all this BS.
And I think it was really, you're absolutely right. If he renounced before he got married, and I really think this is the thing people aren't thinking about. Look, when you renounce and you don't have a lot of money yet, you're not a target. Right. It's when you get up there, and this is where John really comes in, and you have assets, that really where John can really help you out. And the problem is that people aren't seeing it. But look, you're marrying someone. You're marrying someone who's not a U.S. person. That is a commitment. Okay? And if you really value that marriage, you got to be looking hard. And if you're looking at that American lifestyle overseas, you got to be looking really hard at renouncing. And we have discussed the common question people have. Well, what if I want to visit the United States? We've gone over how long you can be in the United States for. It's not that you're barred. You can get back in to visit your folks. 90 days at a clip if you're coming from a good country. It's something you got to look into. But a lot of the countries in Europe, you have no problem getting back to the U.S. for long visits. And so that is the thing. And you're not thinking okay, you guys might not have a lot. Maybe you're in your 30s, your 20s, your 30s, you're not going to have a lot of money. But as you get going more and more, and as you start inheriting things, as you start, you're making you're getting more assets of yourself while you're starting to get other things, right?
Yeah, that's the normal course of events in your life, financially speaking. You build up your wealth, whatever that wealth may be.
Right. And so the best time to do it is before you build up that wealth. And so that's why, look, if you're married overseas and that's your life, you committed to that. This is a monstrous system we have, and we can clearly see that. Do you want to be in the same situation? As Doug and his wife? Do you want to be there because they could not, we know now. Now They didn't know. They didn't have the benefit of knowing what you know.
Right.
You know now that this is what the government will do. Doug didn't know.
Yeah.
This is a unique case. This is a very, very unique case, and frightening beyond belief.
So Anthony, I need to sign off for those people who need to just explore their real options, they can reach out to
Yep,
me.
hang on. Here we go. Yep, and here's your email, US_overseas_advocate@outlook.com. Thanks so much for joining us today, Keith. And here's a link to his group. All right, we'll see you, bud. Thanks
See
again.
you next Wednesday.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. And all right, we're going to continue on. So, yeah, it's really something where I would say we got to start really renouncing citizenship. You know, John, I don't think we're going to be able to finish what we got today. We might have to continue next week as well because we're about to sign off. But I think, our takeaways so far are that we're dealing with a very emotive indictment that is, and Doug Edelman is being tried in the press, tried in the court of public opinion. And what this case ultimately comes down to is two things. Number one, that the United States of America taxes citizens on this worldwide income. And number two, the government has the burden of proof to prove that these assets were actually owned by Doug and not his wife. So I think that's really the summary where we are now.
I mean, those are two key points, right? Listening to the conversation between you and Keith there. It seems to me that people really do need to understand is that, on the one level, on one side, all citizenship have benefits. U.S. citizenship clearly has benefits, no question. You can live there, you can work there. But the problem is this, is if you're not going to live there, I think that the biggest risk to your future and long-term financial stability probably is U.S. citizenship. Unless there's some relief on this year with President Trump's pledge, the LaHood thing, et cetera. I think people have got to get out. I think they've got to get out.
I think you got to get out. It is, there's not a lot. So, I would say if you have a difficult expatriation, you might want to reach out to John on this. And we'll probably go in more of this next week. We just run out of time. This is really, really fascinating. You want to reach out to John at Citizenship Solutions at proton.mail, talk about your case. And also, if you are looking to get in compliance or renounce, you can also reach out to my firm. You can book a time here at IRSMedic.com. Offshore, we do tax prep, everything from start to finish, and we even do current year tax prep. Again, it's better earlier than later to renounce, and John and I can both testify to that. It's much better to do it when you're younger and your assets aren't as large, as opposed to when you are older and could have some.
Yeah, the irony, of course, is that although it's better to do it earlier rather than later, it's for younger people where U.S. citizenship has the most value. That's the problem. That's the dilemma, right?
Yeah.
But let's see what we have here.
Yeah, we got Borchell, and his comment: former defense contractor millionaire indicted on tax fraud. Sounds like they are making an example for him for not paying protection racket like others that enjoy a tax-free life. And boy, Borchell, exactly, because I happen to know a few very connected people I can't talk about because the law forbids me from talking about it. I could be criminally indicted if I talk about what I know about the wealthy connected billionaires who are evading taxes with impunity. Really, with impunity. It's not just Hunter Biden. But one more thing I would say is that this makes me think of Al Capone. And I did a video years ago, and it should have gotten more views. I don't know, like 4,000 views. The video was awesome. I'm like, what? But essentially, I explain how Al Capone actually, John, I don't know if you know this, but Al Capone actually made a voluntary disclosure. He actually made a voluntary disclosure to the U.S. Treasury. His attorney says, yeah, Al Capone wants to come into compliance with the taxes. And this is what we think he owes. So let us know what to do. And so with that, the government turned around with an indictment. And so the entire thing is made up that Al Capone didn't take his taxes seriously. Nope, he hired an attorney to address it. But the government wanted Al Capone's scalp because Al Capone was more popular than the federal government because he actually, whatever he did, he was more popular. So
he was providing actual value to
right.
The government doesn't.
Right. And
that's the difference. Right?
And that's the difference. And so it was really Secretary Mellon who wanted Al Capone taken down. So that's really how it happened. The entire thing of what you're told is a government lie. Believe it or not, I know. And it's so crazy, right? So that's one thing. And so, because of course, how was Treasury, how was Mellon living, right? Yeah, he was doing okay, right?
Let me ask you a question. Why
Yeah.
do you think they're going after this guy so ferociously?
He is the enemy of somebody. He didn't donate to the right people.
Okay.
That's what I would say. The most obvious answer is like, yeah, because I know far worse. I mean, whatever he did, it's like, I don't even know. Your claim is his wife really owned it, but like, there's a colorable claim there. But I mean, I know of fraudulent foreign invoices paid by large U.S. partnerships that are completely BS, that are really easy to prove, but the government isn't interested in that. In fact, when the whistleblowers are retaliated again, against that, So. Yeah, so I'm not so sure. Hey, Sherry, thank you so much. And Just a Girl Japan. Well, I'm glad you're catching us on the stream. All right, glad you're at least you're live today. Professor of Stuffology, thank you. Oh, I know who the Professor of Stuffology. Now you revealed yourself. I know. I see your I see your things. And I really want to talk to you about some of your things. You're a little cryptic to me. You got to understand that. I got a lot of things going on and my mind goes in a little place. So I just want a little bit more direction because I do see your post and I do think it, because we want to talk about what really is due process. And I do see your stuff and I've been looking into it. What is a court or record? And then this is really the point we're bringing up. Is tax court an administrative court or judicial court? And the answer, it is what? It is a article. Well, what is it? I just read it. It was an Article 1 court because it was created by Congress. It's actually not an Article 2, which is right. I think there's something of that. I don't know, John. What do you think? What do you think this indictment was about?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the only information I have on it is the indictment itself, of course, and there have been a few articles on it. I mean, it really. I mean, clearly they've got it in for this guy, right? There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Why I don't know. I mean, I suspect that it's linked to the the disrespect to Congress in 2010 and not revealing the owners of the company or something like this. But this is it's a much bigger issue, okay, in terms of U.S. tax policy.
Well, something's going on. And Borchell really makes his point, which I think is exactly right. And the military-industrial complex makes sure not to compromise anyone connected with them. Okay, that's a true statement. And I mean, we know there's trillions of dollars that is stolen from the Department of Defense all day. I mean, it's just known, and they fail audits. And right before September 11th, there was a convenient accident on September 11th that blew up all the records that were going to be audited, showing where the theft went. So very conveniently, that was destroyed in September 11th.
Well, this company was I think a result of it was
right. And this company was a result of the war of terror. But it's a great point because we know it's like basically the military industrial complex is really an elaborate money laundering scheme. Really, that's really what it is. Creating defense is secondary. You may get some defense, but really the whole job is to take taxpayers' money and get it out to people for things that really aren't needed, right? And like, but we need this and whatever the case is. And so it is a big, massive fraud. And so you're right. Like, well, doesn't that fraud protect its own? And that's really, I think, the point that Borchell is bringing up here. Doesn't that fraud protect its own? And they don't really seem to be doing that. So, what it would be is like, this is what I would say. I think that might be a more reasonable conclusion, that he stepped on someone's toes within the military industrial complex, somebody with some clout, to say, yeah, I don't think so, buddy. It could be something over something personal, who knows? I mean, that's really the way it is, but it's certainly easy for the government to invent so many things when, there's so many things going on.
Anthony, another thing about this that I find interesting, okay, is the fact that they've indicted his wife. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh, right.
So what this is, I think, is, I mean, we never know what's going on in a marriage, right? But I think that this is probably an attempt to get her to testify against her husband if possible.
to save herself. Well, and it's also the classic, and I was asked my opinion on this. Well, it's a classic move. You also indict the wife who knew nothing about it because that puts intense pressure on the husband to take a plea that's terrible. That's one of the tricks that the government does. That's just one of their nasty little things they do. Oh, yeah, I've caused you a little marital strife, huh? Well, there's a solution to that. We have a solution to the marital strife we're causing. Just plead guilty. Just plead guilty. Shut up and plead guilty. So that's, they're the typical way they work is to indict the wife because they rule by fear and intimidation. Professor of Stuffology picked up a fan. Hey, there you go. All right, glad to have you guys on board. All right, so I think that's what's going to conclude today. I'm going to take a look at the rest of this, which will probably really result in further discussions with John and I. And I'll probably be throwing it on Twitter, by the way. So let me just show you guys, if you want to follow us on Twitter, we're all on there. Keith is on as well. So if you didn't see that, here's Keith. You can see him at Keith_Redmond. And then John, you can follow him on Twitter at Expatriation Law. And even myself, I am on there at IRS_medic.com. The other one was mine, by the way. I just couldn't find the login. at IRSMedic. No one stole it from me, guys. I couldn't find the login, so that explains that. All right, well, with that, we're gonna conclude. I want to thank John so much for getting the indictment, his incredible insight. I want to thank Keith so much for sharing, the truth about the group, and that, he pointed out correctly. Most of the people in Keith's group are married to people who are not U.S. persons. And in fact, most of our clients who we bring through the Streamline program or help renounce also have a non-U.S. spouse. It's incredibly common. And it's really, how the U.S. tax code, we've done this before, how awful it treats people and how it wants to destroy your marriage because taxes. This is Anthony Parent for John Richardson and Keith Redmond. Thanks so much for joining us today. And we'll see you next time.